Hi, this is Rabbi Orlofsky, and welcome to the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. And whether you're watching with our friends over at Torah Time, who are producers, or wherever you watch or listen to your podcast, as always, we are excited to have you along for the experience. And this is beginning our 7th year. This is our anniversary show. Even I clap for that. It's very exciting. Can you imagine? We've done so many years already. It's amazing. And we're approaching our 300th episode. I don't know if this is the 300th episode. It might be. I guess it depends how you count all the shorts and everything too. But wow, it has taught me that I have the ability to talk for 300 hours without any preparation whatsoever. Yeah. You know these guys who go out on dates and they're like, they don't know what to say? I never have that problem. I always find something to say, you know? Sometimes it's nice, sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's relevant, sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's deep, sometimes it's shallow. Yeah, there's all kinds of different things, you know? But the goal is at the end to have a totality, and that's really what life is. Life is made up of many different types of moments, and some of them happy and some of them sad. You know, I mean, some of my episodes that get the most views are my Tisha B'Av episodes, and they're usually pretty sad because Tisha B'Av is a sad day. And then the other ones, surprisingly, which get a lot of views, is my Purim episodes. And they're not usually so sad. At least I try not to make them too sad. So I'm coming on to the anniversary show. And every year when the anniversary show comes around, I want to do something special. And I always think what? But of course, I don't do any preparation. You know? So my daughter, I asked her, I said, so what should I do for the anniversary show? He says, why don't you make a reaction video? I said, I don't know what that means. It says, you know, you show clips of like, you know, the best moments of the show and you react to it. I said, I have 300 shows. How am I going to go through now 300 shows and pick out clips and decide which ones to react to and how to do that? That's going to be too hard. But I got from that a germ of an idea, which I will tell you as soon as I mention our sponsors. And our sponsor is one of our regular sponsors, Rabbi Victor Fried, wishing a k'siva chasima tova to you and yours, me and mine, and all of Klal Yisrael. And it is ironic on one level that Rabbi Victor, who is a close friend of me and a close friend of the show, and has worked very hard to keep it going, because he actually was going to be mentioned in this week's episode without being a sponsor. So this is what they call serendipity. And serendipity is translated as siyata d'shmaya. But serendipity is a much cooler word. I learned that actually from Rebbitzin Center when I were by them for a Suda in Muncie, and then I spoke there. And she was telling stories of serendipity, right? Which is basically siyata d'shmaya. Yeah? So I decided, you know what would be interesting that I would like to share with you is I have had over the past 6 years quite a number of guests. And I want to talk a little bit about what the logic is in having a guest on this show. Because I've had a number of guests, but it's I don't think even 10% of the shows that we've had were maybe 10% were interview shows. But every now and then I wanted to have a guest. I'm going to tell you how it got started. The show started when I asked Michal Samuels, who had set up my website for me and my Facebook page, if we could make a podcast. No, I didn't even know what that meant. I just, podcast. He said, sure. So the first one they filmed in my room in a corner over there. It looked like a hostage video a little bit because, it didn't have the background. And people watched it and wrote in and said, you should be sitting in front of a bookcase. You should be sitting in a chair. You should be, I was like, okay, we can do that. And that's been the format ever since, during COVID, I had to do them over Zoom because we were in lockdown mode. And there was a time that we were green screening the bookcase, but this one's real. This, by the way, was my first shas I got in 8th grade on my Rabbi Whale, who was basically Makariv me, told us to buy Svarim. And so I got that shas for $35 from Z Berman's in 1974, 73. It was 1973 or 74. And I still have it. It shows the test of time. Not because I use it so much, but just because it was a cheap binding, so it fell apart. But I like to tell you because I learned them to death, but I didn't. This is my chassan shas over here that my father-in-law got me of Moshe Gans, Olav Shalom, and I had this. But the chassan shas is really hard to learn with. It's like you take it. The best thing, and again, when I got married in 1982, you'd see these young couples that get married, they'd rent an apartment, and they'd buy a big lazy boy recliner and have his chassan shas. And Friday night, he'd lean back, put the Gemara over him, and fall right to sleep. So that's why I have bought myself smaller ones that are more practical, but these are much easier to see. So anyway, but so we started doing it over here, and it was basically me talking. And at the beginning, it wasn't hard because I had lots of stuff that I wanted to say, just to get out there into the ether. But then one Shabbos, a fellow by the name of Rabbi Fogelgarn from Australia came with a bunch of guys on a trip to Israel, and he asked if he could join us for a Suda. So he said, sure, yeah. And him and the boys, turned out, had sort of a band, and they were singing. They were singing over Shabbos beautifully and harmonizing. And Rabbi Fogelgarn had written a song, that I thought, it'd be nice for me to mefarsim on my podcast. I later found out on YouTube he has like 50,000 views, so he didn't really need me, And although I have a much more fanatical following than he does, So people follow this show, So I said, why don't we do this on the show? Well, Michal had to do a whole thing. He had to get in a bunch of cameras and set up chairs, and they came in with guitars. And that was the very first musical episode, and that's what it was called, the musical. And it was Parshas B'Shalach. So I said, Parshas B'Shalach, Shabbos Shira, you have that. And that was the first guest that I ever had. And since then, we've tried to have some musical guests. And Rabbi Fogelgarn, who is a mechanech, he's now somewhere in Florida as a youth director and doing good work, but he's essentially a mechanech. And that became my litmus test for a musical guest. I tried to have on musical guests from time to time, but I didn't want just somebody who's a musician or somebody who's a singer. That to me holds no appeal for me. There was a major Jewish publication that had on their cover once two very popular singers to talk about issues in Klal Yisrael. And I'm thinking to myself, you're a singer. What just sing. I forgot who said that line once, but to Bruce Springsteen. He goes, just be quiet and sing, and you're a singer, Why in the world should you suddenly become an authority, Jerry Seinfeld got an award once from someplace, I forgot what it was, a special maybe from HBO, whatever. And he says, only comedians deserve awards. Actors don't. He says, actors show up. Somebody wrote them a line. There's a director telling them how to say the line. They film the line, and then they give them an award. The guy is a genius. We wrote the line, you read it just like we told you, just like we directed you. Wow, what a genius this guy is. And then they go for opinions on politics. Like all of a sudden now you're a Bucky in politics, now you're a genius in this, So He says, but comedians, we write our own material. We have to look around and see what's going on in the world. Our opinions, should have more weight, So just because a person sings doesn't mean that you're anything other than a singer, So the people that I had on after that, I always tried to have on people who I felt represented something more. So I had on my good friend Lenny Solomon, who of course is from Schlock Rock fame. I wore my Schlock Rock shirt once on the show. Even when he wasn't here, he gave it to me as a gift. And our theme song is Lenny Solomon. If you ever go on the website and watch the full video, it's Lenny playing, and he wrote the Rabbi Orlofsky theme show song, etc. I'm so excited because my mother, whenever I would start complaining about something, she goes, "Oh, that's your new theme song?" And I was like, "No, I have my own theme song. I don't need another theme song." But it used to be we just had this little bling, that's introduced it. And then after Lenny wrote that song, it became, took it to a whole nother level. The Rabbi Orlofsky theme song, yeah? And, but Lenny was a guy who I worked with at NCSY, and he was an accountant. And it was after one Havdalah that I gave that he was so moved by this, he said, I was talking about doing what's meaningful, etc. And he said, I have a koyach in music to teach Torah through music, and I'm going to leave accounting and do this. Yeah. I question that decision to this day, but listen, there's no question that tens of thousands of young people have been introduced to Yahadus because of him. So I had him on. And I had my good friend Ari Goldberg. Yeah. And I remember I called him up, and I wanted to have him on the show, So he says, "Oh, I'll talk to my kids." So my kids said I should go on the show. People watch it. And we go back a very long time. He's been a Shabbos guest by us, and he's essentially a mechanech. He has a parsha video that he does every week, and he teaches Torah. In fact, when he would make a concert, he was one of those people who had difficulty because he would not allow any mixed seating. And some people would have men's seating, women's seating, and mixed seating, which is exactly the main minyan at Grossinger's on Rosh Hashanah. When they brought in the choir from the New York Philharmonic to sing. There was another minyan, which was a straight Orthodox minyan, but, mixed, and he has tremendous integrity. So I wanted to bring him on. My son, Moshe Yehuda, who, of course, writes and composes songs. And I really have to have him on because, because he writes his own things now, and he has some real big hits, some of which are Mefarsim and Klei, and some of which are not yet. And I have him on. But he came on with some of his friends from Waterbury, because in Waterbury, they put out their own albums and their own music. We had them on twice, And the first time, they sang beautifully. They didn't really get the conversation part in so much. I basically had them singing. The second time, they said, okay, we're going to do it right this time. And they were a lot of fun. So those are my musical episodes. And of course, I had Nissim Black. And he was a musical star, but he wouldn't sing. Because his story is so unbelievable. And talk about being a mechanech. I mean, this guy inspired me, and I have a heart of stone. And he managed to crack it open because he's so sincere and so, unbelievable. It's a two-parter. It's definitely kedai to go back and watch it. We got him to do one little piece. All my grandchildren came because Nissim Black's going to sing, And finally, at the end, he did one little song, that we got it in. But most of it was just talking about his story and his life, which is amazing. I'm just thinking, one other musical guest I almost forgot. And that was, if you remember, I had Ari Goldberg on twice, because when I did the series after the tragedy on Shmini Atzeres, I did a whole series on Shabbos, because there were those who said, that it happened on Shabbos, Yontif, so we have to be mechazik our Shabbos. So I gave a whole series on Shabbos. At the end, I talked about Shabbos Zmiris, and I brought Ari Goldwag in to sing some of the nigunim for different, Zmiris, etc. I really needed more of like a musical historian kind of a thing to say where all the nigunim came from. But like I would say a particular thing, and he goes, I never heard of that, but I wrote my own. And he would sing his niggun, which was a lot of fun, don't get me wrong. But somebody said to me, you left out the Sephardi Zmiris. So I brought in my nephew, Ezra Orlofsky, who is a born-again Sephardi. He lives up in the Golan. And he reads Sajid Goen in the Arabic. I mean, just, he's next level. He's not like a regular guy. I brought him in and he did all the Sephardi nigunim. I think those were my musical acts. I don't know, did I forget anybody? Is that all my musical acts? Okay, I think so. But since I mentioned Ezra and since I mentioned Moshe Yehuda, I have had on the show some of my family because, it's a family affair. Full disclosure, I'm giving this away because I really wanted to do it one time. I don't have women on the show. Whether that's right, whether that's wrong, I have all different types of followings. I have certain people who don't have any internet and they call up Torah anytime to hear the podcast, So someone said to me, then what do you care if you have a woman on? They're not going to see you anyway. I said, I understand. But there are also people who do have access to the internet. In fact, there's one yeshiva where someone told me that they have internet in the Oitza Svarim. And when the podcast comes out, the whole tzevet goes in, they lock the door and they put it on. They all watch it together, So I try to be sensitive. There's a principle that I have that I try to be as unoffensive as I possibly can. I don't always succeed. And that's why sometimes Nucky Radio takes me off because I'm not so nucky. And sometimes they put me on with a warning label. But I do try. I really do try. So there was a big issue here in Israel, what they call hadarat nashim, leaving women out of public life. Big issue here in Israel. In America, it's also a big issue because there are the women who are very upset that publications, the frum publications, will not publish pictures of women. The more modern ones obviously will, and put in pictures of women. And so they're like, they won't put in our picture, So there was a big issue in the Hamodia when they put in the picture of the Situation Room when Obama was watching them killing Osama bin Laden. They airbrushed Hillary Clinton out, because that's their policy. That's their policy. Listen, you like it, you don't. Anyway, so I tried to do that, but I wanted to have as a Purim episode to have a couple of my daughters who are very involved in the outside world and things, to come onto the show to speak about Hadarat Nashim covered in sheets. But none of them would agree. Every now and then they would say yes, and then at the last minute they would all back out. But that to me would be just so hysterical to discuss Hadarat Nashim with three girls covered over in sheets. But that never happened. So I never had any of my daughters on. Considering that I have 8 daughters, you understand that kind of makes it a thing. So, of course, my son Yaakov, who had his own podcast and on Israeli politics, he stopped it. But, he, of course, was much more polished, etc. And he would come in all the time. He was, I don't know how many episodes he was with. My son Shlomo, he was on 2 times. One time on a Purim episode with Yaakov, and another time where is the proprietor of Shloim's Meats. He showed everybody, explained the correct way to make a barbecue on Chol Moed. Of course, my son Moshe Yehuda was part of the musical guest. But what many people don't know is that my son-in-law, Avi Lieberman, who is a Magid Shir in Arze Levanon, which most people know as Sussman's. Yeah, he writes Svarim, and he wrote a beautiful sefer on Purim, which, by the way, I wrote an introduction to, and he was on the show speaking about his Purim book. So I had on some. I have a few more son-in-laws we'll have to get on, but not everybody likes to come out and talk. And it's always tough to decide, when it comes to a guest, because there are people who want to be on the show, and I have to make a cheshbon all the time, because at the end of the day, it's the Rabbi Orlofsky show, right? And that's why the podcast that I did that has the most views is when I had on Tuvia Singer, who, of course, is famous for, that was just this past year, for battling missionaries and debating missionaries. And I was talking about it. And I got a lot of the most negative comments. I got the most views and the most negative comments. Why did you keep interrupting Tuvia Singer? And I said, because it's the Rabbi Orlofsky show. And if I don't say anything, then you could just go watch a Tuvia Singer video and you don't need me. The whole reason, it's my show. So I'm interviewing him and I want to try to draw out certain ideas, etc. He's got thousands of videos you can go and watch. I would like to think that the Rabbi Orlofsky experience is going to be a little different. But I have to always consider who I'm bringing on, why I'm bringing it on. So I brought on an old friend, a very old friend, and also someone I know for a very long time. And that was Rabbi Yossi Granovsky, the Rosh Yeshiva of Dovid. And he came in to give a lot of different insights, etc. But I'm friends for many years, and I know what he has to offer. And one of my categories of that I brought in over the 6 years that we've been doing this is some of my friends. So Rabbi Nissel came in to speak about his book about Rav Moshe Shapiro. And of course, he was a Talmud of Rav Moshe Shapiro. I had the chance to listen to some of his shiurim. And so we were able to share Rav Moshe Shapiro stories together. I had on my friend Rabbi Zev Rudman twice, as it happens. One time to talk about the book that he wrote about the women who are childless in Tanakh. And then he talked about his Sefer on Elul and the Yom Narayim, etc. And that was special. I don't know what category I put Rav Gav in. I guess I could count him as a friend, I don't know if he's under the category of friend or famous speaker category. I don't want to be pogeya in his kavod. But we had Rav Gav here. And I've tried to get him to come back a couple of times, but he was always very busy. I have my neighbor and, again, a famous speaker, Rabbi Zachariah Greenwald, who happens to be a neighbor and a friend, but he wrote a book on how to mainstream after, what happens after tshuva. And they wrote the book, he came on, but, I don't know if I put him in the Torah's friend or Torah's special speaker, famous speaker. And that goes with two other ones. We had 3 live shows. When I used to go to America, every now and then I would do a live show. But it was difficult to arrange and to handle things. So, but I had my good friend Rabbi Yitzchak Frankel, who I knew all the way back when he was the Rav of Congregation Bechuri Chemed in Long Beach, and he used to come to my NCSY Shabbatonim. And now, of course, he's the Rav of the Agud of the 5 Towns. And he put out a sefer of Yad Dodi, which is all the psukim he got from Rav David Feinstein. I just used him this year in my Shabbos Shuvu drasha. Quoted a psak that he brought in, which was really fascinating. But he came on the show, and we got to ask him all kinds of embarrassing questions about Rav Moshe that most people would not answer. Franco was more than happy to jump right into the fray, and that was very special. And of course, I had my friend Y.Y. Rubenstein from Manchester. I say from Manchester, but of course he's Scottish, and we had him also talking about, just everything. and that's in the friend category. We also had on Rabbi Mike Ravinsky, who is first of all, we go all the way back. He was a kid in NCSY when I was working in NCSY. Now, when I was working in NCSY, I was also a kid, but I was a little older than he was, so I got to be considered staff, and he was a kid. But he became a mile, and he does thousands of bris milas. Well, I shouldn't say bris milas, circumcisions for goyim, and it was just a fascinating story. He recently lost his wife. We were talking, and he started telling me the most amazing stories, and I said, I have to have you back on to talk about this. But again, just a fascinating fellow. I'm sure I'm going to forget people. I had the schus of having on the show Rav Nosson Geisler. Nosson Geisler was a legend already years and years ago. He was the menahel of Benos Chava, and he was just a legend in girls' chinuch especially. And I'm talking about when this was the gold standard of a seminary, and I did a whole series on girls choosing seminaries. I brought him in the end to talk about it. I also, as most people probably know at this point, I'm a cartoon character. Yeah. And I'm known as Rabbi Sitter. And Dan Roth, who is the head of Torah Live, he's the person who was the brains behind it. And he made a character out of me. I voice it. They drew him a little bit to look like me. In fact, we have a problem because he wanted to start switching over to AI. But when AI does Rabbi Sitter, I come out looking like Doc from the Seven Dwarfs. I said, this is not Rabbi Sitter. And even though it's much more expensive to animate me, old style, he sticks to it. And every now and then just brings me in and I just talk. So we had him on to speak about Torah Live and the amazing things they've done. I mean, during COVID, he offered all of the programming for free just so that kids who were stuck at home would have what to do. And he keeps thinking how to take it to the next level and how to use the technology to help kids learn it. That's why when he described to me originally what he wanted to do, he asked me, what should I call it? And he wrote a book on Pirkei Avos. And he'd ask me for a title on each chapter that he had and each mission that he would do. He would ask me for a title. And I'm good at coming up with titles, And in the end, he asked me for a title for the book. And I said, well, the whole book over here is trying to take the Mishnah and take the Musar and make it relevant for people today. So call it relevance, which he did. So when he described to me what he wanted to do with this thing where he uses technology to make Torah come alive, I said, why don't you call it Torah Live? And he's like, yeah. And so I am the godfather of Torah Live. Thank you very much. And Rabbi Sitter character, of course, is me. So we had him on the show to talk about Torah Live and all the things that it does. And that was also a lot of fun. I'm giving you just an overview so that should any of you want, you can go back and look these up. Apparently, there is a playlist just of where I've had speakers on the show. Now, I had on as a guest producer Michael Samuels. It was an anniversary show, and like this. And I was thinking of something to talk about that would be, appropriate for an anniversary show. So I told him, you come on and talk about how this whole guy started. So he basically talked about the evolution of the Rabbi Orlofsky show and how it took place and everything that went on with it. Anyway, after he got married and he really didn't have time for this anymore, so we had Yisrael Yudkowsky, who became the person who was filming and editing it, etc. And we never had him on the show, but we had his brother on in a two-part piece, and it is essential watching because with especially the anniversary of Shmini Atzeres and the tragedy that took place, he tells the story how his friend who works for Hatzalah woke him up on Shmini Atzeres morning, and they heard that there was something going on in the south, and they got into their Hatzalah ambulance and they drove down, and they came to the Tzomet, and that was as far as they were allowed to go. And he said, but there are people being killed. He goes, you are a nice Haredi guy. This is his brother Ari. He says, you're a nice Haredi guy. You drive an ambulance, take little from kids to the hospital who broke their arm, you know what I mean? But you should not be in a war zone. You're not combat trained. And he said to the guy with him, I was not Mechalel Shabbos and Yontif to stand here. And he drove in past the roadblock. And they can trace all of the ambulances. They have, and they said, come back here right now. And he says, I'm not. He said, then we're not responsible. And he says, I got down there and I was the only ambulance operating. Because Magen David Adom, one of the ambulances got blown up, so they all went to hiding. There were no army ambulances. He's driving back and forth to the Tzomet with wounded people all day and handing them over. I said, well, what about supplies? He says, every time we brought in the wounded, they would clean out the ambulance and give us new supplies. I said, from where? He says, we had a truck that came in with supplies from Hatzalah. I said, the government didn't give? No. Anyway, it's a fascinating story after story of what took place over there. And it's such a story of courage. And on the subject of courage, I don't know how you pick one that's special. Because everybody here, I'm something of a cheerleader when it comes to guests. Like I said, I don't have on somebody unless I really feel like I want to hear what they have to say and what they're contributing. That to me is very important. And my good friend Victor Fried, who happens, serendipity is sponsoring this episode, he's very involved in Shuvu. Now, most people are familiar with Shuvu. They make schools for Russians, etc., etc. Well, he got Michal Goderman, who was the head of Shuvu, to come. Every now and then, one of these episodes go on for two episodes, because if we have a lot to talk about, we just keep going, I have to tell you, he was so fascinating. I just wanted to keep going with him, but he had a hard stop because he had a meeting that he had to get to. So him and Rabbi Vigda came on the show, and I have to say, I was blown away by what they had to say. Because, I've heard of Shuvu, but the Shuvu schools are creating a mapecha in Klal Yisrael. Let me just give you a statistic. In Israel, I forgot how many kids are registered for school this coming year. 2/3 of them are in religious schools. Only 1/3 are in secular schools. Because even secular parents don't want to send them to the secular schools anymore. That's what Shuvu started with the concept. They started with the concept of take Russian families who want the best education and say, we're going to give them the best education. We're also going to teach them about Judaism. And the parents were like, well, okay, but as long as they get the best education. And so they give them top-notch, better than, unfortunately, public schools are not that successful. In the Jimmy Carter administration, they started the Department of Education. And from that point onwards, the standardized scores in tests have fallen. So, the public schools are not very good at doing their job. And Shuvu was. And he talked about all the fights that he had to be able to get it started and get it in. And then he told me something that was unbelievable. He says he kept having people come to him, secular Israelis, who said, we also want a Shuvu school. How come only the Russians get it? We want our kids to get a top flight education. He says, but, we also teach religion. He goes, we don't care. We'll put up with it. We want our kids to be in a safe environment without any violence and crime. We want our kids to grow up with a sense of respect and kavod. We want our kids to get a top flight education. He says, and this to me was maybe one of the most fascinating lines I've ever heard. He says, so we hired one of the top polling services in Israel. And we asked them, I want you to do a poll and find out how many people would come to a Shuvu type school with what we have to offer, if it wasn't for Russians, just regular Israelis. He says, and they said to me, what answer do you want? He goes, what do you mean? He says, usually when people commission a poll, they tell us what answer they want to find. I was blown away that they would mamish admit it. And he was like, no, I want the truth. He was like, oh, I guess we could do that. You ever stop me? We could do that if we had to. And it came back with this enormous amount of people who would sign up in such a school. And he said, I could flip Israel tomorrow. I could open up all these schools. I just don't have the money. And I thought to myself, if somebody was in the position to fund this, we could open up hundreds of schools for 1 million secular Israelis, and they would all learn about Yadus. It's right there. Anyway, it was so he had to cut it short and he had to go. But he gave the history of Shuvu and how it happened and how everybody was fighting them. Amazing. I think that's everybody. I think I tried to remember everybody. I hope I did. And I hope you can see that there's a method to my madness. I don't have on guests all the time. And there are a lot of people who ask me they would like to be guests on the show. I don't just have on people to talk. Because for the most part, this is not an interview show, right? This is not meaningful people. Who, by the way, have never asked me to be on. I'm waiting to get on to meaningless people. I think they're going to call me. I love that joke. It's one of my favorite jokes. But, but you see, I have on family members because, as somebody said once, when you watch the podcast, you know everything that's going on in my life. I wear my heart on my sleeve. You know everybody I know. You know everything I do. You know where I'm going, My kids, it's very uncomfortable for my children. But then they shouldn't have had me as a father. But they should have thought about that beforehand when they were up in Shemayim and they were picking their families. But, they meet people and they're like, oh, are you so-and-so? Are you the one who... It's like, he goes, my gosh, they know all about our lives. They go, yep, you're a Nepo baby. 100%, I include my family in this because my life is basically a sitcom and everybody has a role, has a part to play. And it's very exciting and everybody becomes a part of it. I have so many things I wanted to do. I wanted to, we make a big Simcha Shvei Shoeva. I wanted to film that once. When we were doing the Shabbos series, I wanted to, go down and ask Rabbi Horowitz, the Boston Rebbe, to do a tish, so people could see a tish. He does it in English, so that's a big advantage. Not a lot of Rebbes do, and go in there and film it. But it's hard to do on a Friday night. But but maybe we could set it beforehand. I don't know. Anyway. But there's so many different things that are exciting. Already that my mother taught me how to cook, and I have to bring it out. Oh my gosh! I had some guys who came by, and they asked me to wear it on the show. I haven't worn it yet. I have to get it. They bought me a apron, and it says on it, "It's easy, stupid." They know that's how my mother taught me to cook. She'd say, do this, do that. It's easy, stupid. I said, I don't know how. She goes, it's easy, stupid. Do this, do that, So I have an apron, like that. When maybe this will be the year of the merch. You could buy yourself your apron. You could get everything in. But when we do the recipes, so people have said, gosh, you should do like a live demonstration or something. That's maybe we'll see. Mostly it's me just sitting here in this chair in front of the bookcase, just sharing my thoughts. And gosh, it's been so many years. And I can tell you, new producer Ari always, he has comments that people send in besides the questions that people submit. Oh, I got to tell you, we have a few important announcements I'll get to, but thank you, Rabbi Orlofsky, for all your Torah and Chizuk. I have been listening to you, Yeshurim, ever since you gave a shir at the Pesach Seder in the Mir Yeshiva, Ezras Noshim in 1999. Now, he learns in the Mir, so he didn't say that, 57, 59. I'm translating. As a Malamed, I have used your Hashkafa Shiurim countless times to give over Amunah and Yahadus to my Talmidim. But I have never received so much Chizuk as I did when I downloaded your shir on Simcha at the beginning of Adar. I have just been strongly criticized by someone dear to me and was feeling pretty down, and it was affecting the mood in my home. Your Shmoozecast, that's a new one, helped me change perspective, and by the time the shir was over, I was able to change my mood and change the atmosphere in my house too. Thank you, and may you continue to be Mechazek Klal Yisrael for many years, mit gesund. Thank you so much. There are hundreds of these, of people whose lives are difficult and they get chizuk. I can't tell you how many people. I just met another one, He said he was sick and it was hard for him to learn to do anything. The only thing he could do is listen to my shir and listen to my podcast. I've heard this from so many people. I really should make a deal with the health funds that they, that they sponsor the show, because there's so many people get chizuk from people who are sick, people who are struggling. I hear from older singles. I hear from yeshiva guys who are having issues. I hear from divorcees. I hear from people who are mamish, all kinds of tsaros and terrible things. The first year when I gave a podcast about dealing with suffering, as a fellow called me up who had lost a child and said, this is the first nechama that I've gotten. So the fact that I know that I'm doing this, and when I say I bring my family into the show, I'm including you. Everybody who listens to this show is part of the family. And when I meet you, and like I say, I haven't met you all, because there's about 25,000 of you. But when I go to Lakewood to go to Gourmet Glatt to go and get something, or when I'm in the 5 towns, or I don't know when this happened. People don't say 5 towns anymore. They go 5 towns. I don't know who was gurish that should change. Probably the same person who decided that Qatar should be Qatar, Welcome back, Qatar. But it was always Qatar, But whoever named it 5 towns, I'll be in 5 towns and I'll be going in some place and I meet people, Or I was in England, I had people coming over to me. I was in Arizona, I had people coming over to me. It's the most amazing thing that's gratifying, because it's not me, it's us. I really believe that very much. And we're doing this together. And that's why when I meet somebody who says to me, I just found the show, and I'm up to, episode 200 and something. Did you sat there and listened to over 200 hours of me? Luckily, I don't listen when I talk. Otherwise, how did I listen to myself for 300 hours? But knowing that you're the most important person out there, and that's why, I didn't get enough of you. I'm going to try again next year, who we're going to record themselves and wish everybody in the Rabbi Orlofsky show community, a good gebench to yar. Yeah. So we have a few, we've peppered them in between. Hopefully you've seen them. At one point, there was a time, if you go back to the early episodes, I used to do 45 minutes. And producer Michal came up with the idea of adding in like 15 minutes of questions and answers. Of course, I end up talking too much. And there's this brilliant idea that producer Ari has to start doing just a question and answer segment. Do one question and answer several times a week. Just put that up separate. Like we do the Parsha in 5, just to deal with questions. Now, obviously, if it's a longer question, I make a whole podcast out of it. So, but the smaller questions, you know. So I didn't get to any questions here, but here's an example. By Eliel Sternberg. I am sure the Rav gets lots of questions. How does the Rav decide which ones to ask on the show? Now, that's not worth a whole podcast. That's a nice short question. And I will answer it for you. Yeah? First of all, it's got to be a question that I know the answer to. So I'm kind of fixing this, right? When I do a question and answer in public, so I don't get to editorialize. You take whatever they get asked. But here, because it's my show, I can decide which questions I'm going to answer and which ones not. So obviously, I'm going to go first towards the ones that I really know. Yeah. Sometimes questions are silly, and then I have to decide if I want to answer it or not. You know, what's your favorite food? What's your favorite this? What's your favorite that? You know. But I got one question. I've been debating. This was years ago. I've been debating whether or not to answer it. It's like, how many ties do you have? Because you might notice I try to change my tie with each episode, and I'll tell you why. There's a reason for it. Because sometimes when people go and they look at the little snapshot, the little picture, how do they know whether it's an episode they saw or not? So if I'm wearing a different tie, that at least gives them an idea that, oh, I didn't see this one yet. So I do have a lot of ties, and I'm a little bit of a hoarder, and I hold on to them. So you've seen some of my novelty ties. I'm sure I wore my white tie for Yom Kippur on the show. I wore my gold tie for Rosh Hashanah on the show. I wore my matzah tie for Pesach on the show. I have some novelty ties, and then I have certain other ties that I try to mix in. I always thought, I don't know if that's worth anybody's time, me bringing out and showing all my ties. I have been asked by more than once, could you go over all the Svarim in the bookcase? Yeah? No. But I can sing from Uncle Moshe. But it's so hard to learn, Rebbe, all the Svarim in the library. It'll take so long to learn everyone. I'm afraid that I'll never be a Talmid Chacham. And that's all these books back there. That's them. All the ones you need to learn. It's very funny. I spoke once in JFS in London, and they have a fellow who's in charge of Jewish studies, you know. So I said, you know, what can I talk about? I don't know if he wants this publicized, but I didn't mention his name. So, in fact, I'm not even mentioning the school. There was a school in London, doesn't matter which one. And so I asked him, what can I talk about? And he says, anything that God gave Moses on Mount Sinai, we don't teach here. Which I know is interesting. So one thing is I try to find a question I know the answer to. Second of all, I try to find one that's not too absurd. Third of all, I try to take a question that I think will be interesting to the majority of the audience, because sometimes questions are very narrow. And I try to answer those sometimes in an email if I can, you know, but they're not a question for everybody. You know, like this happened to my chicken as a kosher, you know, so that's not a question for everybody necessarily. It's a you know, a more unique one. You know, I just found out I'm a mamzer. You know, what do I do now? You know, it's like I don't think I need to deal with that with everybody. You know, so I try to find questions that I think are going to be more universally interesting, etc. So I do have a tremendous backlog because I've just been talking too much. And that's why, like I said, when I have a guest on, I talk also. It's not just to have a guest, otherwise you can go watch their YouTubes. There are plenty of them. I had Rabbi Fogelgarn, the very first guest, and he sang his song, yes, it is a big deal. Every Friday night is a big meal, right? And I thought, well, I'm giving him an exposure. And then I see he has his own video already where he sings the song and, got 50,000 views. So, I mean, anybody I have on my show, there's no exclusives here. I'm not breaking any news, There's nobody here who you can't find, plenty of videos that they've made themselves. If I have Donald Trump on, I'll try not to talk too much. No, that's not true. I definitely will. But, there are certain people I have a chance to come on and ask them questions. But the questions I want to ask are questions that I think are important questions for Klal Yisrael, as opposed to, and I mentioned this when I talked about all the criticism I got when I had Nissim Black on. If you watch the 2-part interview, and I encourage you, every now and he says, I never told this story before. I never said this before. I'm not asking generic questions. I'm speaking with him as one mechanech to another, as one marbitz Torah to another. He happens to be more famous than I am. He also happens to be black. You know what I mean? He also knows rap. I don't know rap. You know what I mean? I think that's a gift. That's the expression gift rap, if you ever heard it. That's where it comes from. But anyway, so, but I can't do that, So, but I want to talk about him as a person and the questions that I think people want to hear in order to get that inspiration and that meaning. And that's why we have this show. That's it. That's what we're trying to accomplish. And every guest that I've had on, and I hope to have on guests, I have a list of people I would like to have on. And Mr. President, if you're listening, I'd love to have you. Mr. Prime Minister, you're welcome to come on as well. I won't ask you too many hard questions. And if you don't come on, I do have people who do a BB imitation. I believe that this is a time when we must come together. Anyway, but we could do that, But if we want to have big names, but I find so much more people who are just fascinating, and I can't have on that many people because I'm surprised by this. But people don't want to have guest shows all the time. They want to see me. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky show. Yeah, Torah and mitzvahs ready to go. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky show. Till next time. All right. Anyway, so I wanted to tell you about that. And then I want to tell you about something else that was suggested by one of our community. They said, I would love to sponsor an episode, but I can't. It's too much money. So why don't you have small sponsorships? Okay, so we don't get a whole hesped at the beginning. You know what I mean? You don't get a whole speech about us, but just have a list of people. You can even just put it on the screen. Who gave $18, $25, whatever it is, and just say, these people are all helping to contribute to sponsor the show. And I spoke it over with producer Ari, and he says, I think that's a great idea. We're going to be starting that. We're going to be starting the new question and answer forum. And we have some other exciting things planned that we hope to do. I have to give you an update on Pesach. They finally got back to me. And they said, why do you think we weren't interested? Of course we're interested. And we finally set up a meeting for the end of October. And I'm making this very clear to you. I have a list of requirements because I want this to be the best Pesach for you if you're coming. If you're not coming, I hope you have a wonderful Pesach wherever you are. But, I have to make sure that everything is going to be user-friendly for my people, the way that I want it. And so we're going to have a meeting. But you said, why do you think we're not interested? I said, because I spoke to you 6 months ago. The day after Pesach, I went up to your office and I talked to you. Now, I'm not doing this. My son-in-law is doing it because, I have a big mouth and I'm not really good at these kind of things. Because I sometimes say things that are, not presented in the most diplomatic fashion. Yeah, you moron. But anyway, chas v'shalom. Anyway, but we're going to have that meeting, and I will give you an update. I'll tell you the meeting is October 23rd, and right after that, I will make an announcement. Hopefully, they will agree to everything that I want, and we will start booking. Those of you who have already reserved, 8 rooms, 10 rooms, I have you all written down. You're all there. And 1 room, 2 room, 2. I mean, just saying, don't worry. Everything is there. I hope that I can work it out. And if so, it should be something that'll be great for everyone. And that's it. Welcome to a new year of the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Welcome to the Rabbi Orlofsky community. If you are seeing this for the first time, you must be wondering to yourself, who is this guy? Why is everybody watching him? That is the question that everyone needs to ask as we begin our 7th year. And this has just been a privilege that I cannot put into words that I have this opportunity. More than anything, you know how many people I know who try to make podcasts and they can't get people to watch it? And I'm talking about famous people. And the fact that you watch me and share with me and I share with you means that we have a special bond. I feel a special achrayus to you, and I hope you feel an achrayus to this show. And Amir Hashem, thank you again, Rabbi Vigdor, our good friend. Thank you to all of the guests who have honored us by being on the show during these past 6 years. And Mikan Hala. Hopefully this year will be even better than the years before. And that's it for this episode. If you want to find out more about the show, you can go to my website, RabbiOrlofsky.com. You can ask a question. You can leave a comment. You can sponsor an episode. You can sponsor a Parsha in 5. I don't know if you can sponsor a question and answer yet. I think you can. If you go to sponsor an episode and you want to sponsor less than a full episode, you can do it already, and you'll be on the next episode where we'll just have the names of the people who are contributors and supporters and friends of the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. And you can sign up for one of my online shiur, Tefillah shiur on Sunday, Women's Mesilas Yesharim on Monday, and Daf Yomi every morning, Eastern Standard Time at 7:15. And that's it for now. And until next time, we continue Hala. I am David Orlofsky, and this has been the Rabbi Orlofsky Show.
It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Torah and Simcha, ready to go. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Knowledge and wisdom will help you grow. Lots of fun in every episode, and we don't have to rhyme. No, we don't. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show on RabbiOrlofsky.com. Torah, anytime, YouTube and more. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Torah and Simcha, ready to go. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Till next time, till we meet again. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show.